The World Cup in Qatar faces controversy. Elon Musk makes a positive change to Twitter, and President Biden pledges to pay reparations for climate change. That and more on this week's headlines. To America Uncovered, I'm Chris Chappell. 5 people were killed and 25 injured during a mass shooting at an LGBTQ nightclub in Colorado Springs this week. The gunman was ultimately subdued by Army veteran Rich Fierro, who attended the club with his family to watch a drag show. Fierro disarmed the shooter and beat them with their own rifle.
I got into mode, and I needed to save my family. And that family was, at that time, everybody in that room. And that's what I was trained to do. I saw him and I went and got him.
Fierro was joined by other patrons in subduing the shooter, including a drag queen who stomped the shooter in the face while wearing high heels. I hope to literally add insult to injury, the drag queen also roasted him while stomping in time with a Cher song, the club remix. That's double time on the bass drum. Authorities haven't found a clear motive behind the shooter's attack. But of course, that hasn't stopped some people from using this as an opportunity to try and score some points for their teams. The shooter allegedly has ties to the Mormon church, as their mother is a member. But the church said they haven't been active in some time. Some have said this was the motivation, and that Mormons are homophobic and violent. Because as we've learned, a suspect's religion is always to blame when they kill someone. Unless, of course, they're Muslim. In that case, it has nothing to do with it, you Islamophobe. But maybe none of that matters, since it turns out the shooter themselves may be LGBT, at least the T part. Court documents reveal that the shooter identifies as non-binary. Some are saying this is proof that it wasn't a hate crime. Others are saying they're just doing this to avoid hate crime charges. And others are still pretty sure it's the Mormons' fault. Or should we wait until there's some concrete facts before assuming the motive? There's also a shooting at a Chesapeake, Virginia Walmart this week where a manager killed 6 and wounded 6 before killing himself. Quick, let's play Guess the Motive. Because what's the point of a tragedy if you can't use it for political advantages by scoring points for your team? Forget baseball. This is America's real national pastime. Every time someone watches CNN or Fox News cover a mass shooting, there should be a guy nearby selling Cracker Jacks. Speaking of a country's national pastime, the UK and soccer. Instead of focusing on the elaborate multi-million-dollar celebrity-studded World Cup opening ceremony in Qatar, the BBC ignored it and criticized Qatar's treatment of LGBT members and migrant workers. Do you know how bad Qatar has to be to make the UK ignore soccer? British people love soccer so much that some of our viewers there are screaming at their phones in public right now because they're so mad I'm calling it soccer instead of football. That's right, soccer. Qatar was awarded the World Cup all the way back in 2010, after allegedly bribing officials from FIFA. In preparation for this World Cup, Qatar spent over $220 billion building roads, stadiums, and hotels. And who built all this? Countless migrant workers. 95% of Qatar's working population is from overseas. These workers come from poor countries in South Asia and Africa, and they were often abused and treated like slaves. Many of them were basically indentured servants because they had to pay off huge recruitment fees to the people who brought them over to work. Over 6,500 migrant workers died during these construction projects. And many of their family members claim they died under mysterious circumstances and they haven't received compensation for their work. This upset everyone. Well, except for Amazon, who said, see, we don't treat our workers that badly. Besides migrant workers, Qatar also isn't very friendly to members of the LGBT community. Homosexual acts are a criminal offense in the country, punishable by time in prison. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wow, that sounds like such a fun place to hold a sporting event. No wonder FIFA chose them. They definitely weren't bribed. Several teams plan to wear rainbow armbands featuring the expression "One Love" to show support for LGBT people. But then a lot of them decide not to, after FIFA threatened to penalize the teams during the game if they did. In a statement, the European teams said, "We were prepared to pay fines that would normally apply to breaches of kit regulations, and had a strong commitment to wearing the armband. However, we cannot put our players in the situation where they might be booked or even forced to leave the field to play." Because they support the LGBT community until it costs them a yellow card. Soccer players are so afraid of yellow cards, they immediately shut off the radio whenever it plays Ocean Avenue. Yep, that's a song reference from 2003 because that's the last time I listened to any new music. LGBT groups criticized FIFA for not allowing players to wear the armbands, and criticized the teams for not following through on what turned out to be an empty gesture. I guess they were just trying to score political points. Although, to be fair, any points would make it more interesting than the average soccer game. As if all that wasn't enough, Qatar also broke a promise to allow cooked kosher food at the World Cup. They won't allow Jewish prayer services. They really don't like Jewish people. Fortunately, the Qatari government's blatant anti-Semitism hasn't pushed away World Cup sponsors like Adidas. Because it's one thing for a government to teach children that Jews are treacherous, but at least they didn't write mean tweets about them. More after the break. Welcome back. CBS has confirmed that data obtained from Hunter Biden's laptop 2 years ago was authentic. At the time, it was labeled Russian disinformation and censored by social media platforms. Wow, how shocking, is what I'd be saying if it weren't for the fact that I talked about this 2 years ago when it happened. If the media keeps validating things I've always known to be true, then we're about 6 months away from the New York Times admitting that cilantro is just soap-flavored parsley, and everyone who says otherwise is in on the conspiracy. I don't know why the Illuminati is trying to ruin salsa, but I'll find out. Something else I covered is how the White House is trying to get around the First Amendment by working with tech companies to censor people on social media. A U.S. district judge ordered former White House press secretary Jen Psaki to answer questions under oath in a lawsuit against the Biden administration. The lawsuit named Psaki because they believed she had knowledge of the White House pressuring Facebook to crack down on misinformation. They believed this because Psaki had publicly said the White House was pressuring Facebook to crack down on misinformation. Yeah, that would do it. Psaki tried getting out of this by saying it put an undue burden on her. But the judge said any burden on Psaki is outweighed by the need to determine whether free speech has been suppressed. At the very least, maybe we'll get some answers. And who's to say whether or not big tech companies actually censored anyone? I mean, YouTube is a giant tech company, and they definitely don't censor or suppress us. I mean, they let me say and like a Pikachu being mugged. You know, I think that was my best analogy ever. Just to be sure we're not censored or demonetized, let's talk about something that isn't too dark or controversial. Abuse of minors. You know, now might be a good time for an America Uncovered mental health break. Here's a Labradoodle named Mars running in slow motion. Now I want you to hum the Chariots of Fire theme to yourself while watching this. There, I feel better. Now, back to the news. Pre-Elon Musk's Twitter was looking at monetizing adult content on the platform to compete with OnlyFans. There was just one teeny tiny, little, gigantic problem. Twitter had a massive issue with sexually exploitive material of minors on its platform. This was repeatedly brought to their attention, but largely ignored, even after being sued over it. That was the old Twitter regime. Since then, things have changed, to put it mildly. As much as I've covered how insane Twitter has become under Elon Musk's leadership, responding to this issue, Musk said he was making it his #1 priority. According to a human trafficking survivor who now works as an advocate for victims, Twitter eliminated 3 main hashtags used to sell child sexual abuse material. They also have a direct reporting option. Wow, credit where credit is due. Musk really did make this his #1 priority. That means the updated priority list for Elon Musk's Twitter is 1. stop sexually exploitive material featuring minors. 2, end needless drama. 3, LOL, just kidding about number 2. And after the break, members of Congress want to break up Ticketmaster. Welcome back. After a horrifically botched sale of Taylor Swift concert tickets last week, involving inflated prices, long wait times, and canceled sales, a U.S. Senate antitrust panel will hold a hearing to see if Ticketmaster and its owner, Live Nation, should be considered a monopoly that needs to be broken up. Ticketmaster is universally reviled, but large artists still work with them as they're often the only game in town. But now that Swiftie members of Congress weren't able to get their tickets, they finally see Ticketmaster as the monopoly they are and will try to shake them off. Was that my best joke? No. But to be fair, it's not bad considering I only came up with it after Googling Taylor Swift songs, since I haven't listened to modern music since 2003. As you know, all too well. Speaking of disasters, a 5.6 magnitude earthquake hit a town in Indonesia, killing hundreds and injuring over 1,000. Many are still missing, and rescuers are trying to find survivors trapped under collapsed buildings. You know, I don't often do this, but this is one of those rare weeks where I think we need a second America Uncovered mental health break. Oh, Mars, you're such a good boy. Look at your big floppy ears. You would definitely win an Olympic medal in cuteness. Yeah, we all needed that. Why do all the depressing news stories have to happen on Thanksgiving week? As if spending time with your family isn't stressful enough. At COP27, the UN's annual climate summit, the U.S. and other wealthy nations pledged to pay reparations to poor nations for damage done by climate change. Okay, but according to these nations, climate change is still happening, isn't it? This is like paying someone $100 for crashing into their car a few years ago, and then as you pull out of their driveway, you crash into it again. It also doesn't send the best message for hope in the future that COP27 was sponsored by Coca-Cola, one of the planet's biggest plastic polluters. As you can imagine, a lot of people weren't too happy with U.S. President Joe Biden promising to pay up to $1 billion for climate reparations. Some thought the story was satire. The saddest part is that's not the craziest thing that came out of COP27. Last month, the White House announced they were funding research to try and find ways to artificially alter the Earth's climate. And one of those ways, only to be used as a last resort, would be reflecting sunlight. They want to block out the sun. Who are they, a Superman villain? Yes, I'm aware that's Jeff Bezos and not Lex Luthor. No, I didn't stutter. And the craziest part of the story by far is that China said they wouldn't be paying developing nations anything, even though they release more CO2 into the atmosphere than any other nation by far. Because, get this, China considers themselves a developing country, despite having the second largest economy in the world. This would be like a 47-year-old refusing to pay taxes because he considers himself a teenager. So America is footing the bill for climate change purely as a symbolic gesture, while the largest contributor to climate change is doing nothing. And everyone's pretending this is fine and normal and doesn't leave a terrible taste in our mouths. Just like cilantro. So what do you think about the stories we covered this week? Leave your comments below. And if you want to help us deliver nonpartisan news, be sure to support America Uncovered by going to patreon.com/AmericaUncovered. All it takes is as little as $1 or more per episode to fight YouTube's censorship and demonetization. We rely on your support to help us keep making great episodes. Once again, I'm Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching America Uncovered.